Okay, guys, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining People of Research for our lightning talks. My name is Faisal. I am the founder and community manager for People of Research. I'm also a UX researcher at American Express. So, who are People of Research? So, People of Research is a global hybrid community uniting researchers across the tech industry. So, if you're a UX researcher, research ops professional, or behavioral scientist or beyond, we're on a mission to create an environment for you to connect, collaborate, and grow, which is our core mission. So we have just over 1,200 members across 60 countries, and we're also a free community. And we run virtual events like this. We've got in-person networking and social events. We have an amazing weekly random newsletter, and we also publish member career stories along with a private members channel on Slack. So that's us. But we're all here today as part of our mission to facilitate growth and for our Lightning Talks series. So let's do a really quick Zoom reactions poll and give me a thumbs up if you've been to one of these types of events before. So a Lightning Talks, whether it's in person or virtual. Just give me a thumbs up if you know this format and if you've been, and a thumbs down if you haven't, or just comment in the chat. Okay, so we've got a few of you giving a thumbs up. Amazing. So I think we're all pretty familiar, a nice seasoned crowd. Love it. Okay, guys. So at People to Research, guys, so lightning talks are concise, short presentations designed to foster discussion and curiosity. So each talk is about 10-ish minutes. And we, I guess, have a format designed to give our speakers an opportunity and also our members to learn from the diverse reach of our community members and beyond, in hopes to enable growth, connection, and the sharing of new ideas within a brief time format. So that's the format we use. So in terms of, I guess, duration, so each talk, as I said, will be shortest, lasting between 7.5 to 15 minutes, depending on the speaker. And in today's format, we have four speakers for you today, covering a large range of topics. And yeah, Q&A session. So following each talk, we'll open the floor for about 5 minutes. And yeah, this is your chance to dive deeper into topics presented and engage directly with the speaker. Yeah, come with an open mind. Yeah, approach each talk with curiosity and openness. Be curious, ask questions at the end, be supportive. One of the things we try to do really well at People to Research is to create a respectful and supportive environment. So yeah, please show your encouragement, be considerate during the talks, and also respectful, by ensuring your mics are off, and that you have your cameras on or off. Just be aware, do a quick check now just to see if your mic's on. And yeah, just be considerate. So with that said, guys, what we'll do is we'll jump into a series of intros for our four speakers. They'll do a quick introduction about themselves, and then they'll quickly touch on the topics they'll be covering in the talk. So with that said, let's jump into our first speaker today, who is Pavel, a design lead at AWS. So yeah, take it away, Pavel. Give us a quick intro and let us all know what we will be learning from you.
Thanks, Faisal. So my name is Pavel. I'm based here in Brooklyn as a design lead at Amazon Web Services. I've been in this role for about 5 years now, and it's really changed, the way that I approach my design practice. And so what I'm going to be talking about later today is one of the lessons that I learned in this role, which is how does design actually move faster? We always get criticized that design slows us down, research slows us down. And so I'll be talking about how do we flip that on its head and how do we make design an accelerating force rather than something that is seen as a delay.
Amazing. So next up, we have Emily, a global brand strategy consultant at Vernonical. Hopefully, I got that pronunciation correct.
Yeah, you got it. Hey
Cool.
everyone, I'm Emily, and after working with a lot of different brands, I'm now out on my own, and I've seen a lot as someone who's worked in brand experience, so combining brand systems and managing brands with customer experience in terms of working with different teams, especially within marketing and design, and really going to talk about how to address creative risks from my kind of full-time sailing, which I've been doing for 2 years. So I'll be talking about a sailor's guide to creative risks, bringing those worlds together.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Next up is Sophie, a UX researcher at Centrica.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm a UX researcher at Centrica, which is the UK biggest energy supplier. I don't work in the energy department, more for like home services, so around insurance, one-off repairs, home improvements, these kind of things. I'm a self-taught researcher and I have a background in chemical engineering, so kind of making a move from lab to human experiences. And today I'll be talking about the psychology behind surveys and kind of like what I've learned and what I'm curious about, especially a new technique which kind of like sentence completion but applied for UX. So yeah, that's what I'll be sharing.
Cool. And last but not least is Amanda.
Hey everyone, I'm Amanda, and I have a background in design, strategy, and user research. I've worked in the education space, tech space, film, and kind of all over the place. So I've worn many a hat, and it's been super fun. So today I'm going to be covering linked influencing. So how might we leverage our professional brand, but still be authentic and true to ourselves? So stick around. I think I'm end capping us. It should be really fun. And I'm excited to have you all here.
Love it. Okay, cool guys. So yeah, with that said, let's jump right into our first talk from Pavel. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Pavel. Please take over the screen share, and yeah, give us an idea of your knowledge. Okay, stop sharing.
All right, there we go. So, in the spirit of the lightning talks, I'll be talking about the fastest gun in UX. Without further ado, you know, stop me if you heard this one before, and I spoiled it a little bit earlier. But if you hear, "Oh, research is slowing us down," design is slowing down the process. You need to go faster. You need to be more lean, more agile. And have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to just go faster with your process? And did it work? I've definitely tried it earlier in my career, and it didn't work for me. And I don't think it can work because when we try and do this, when we try and make the design process faster, what we actually end up doing is we make us worse at delivering value. And so we're actually maximizing the wrong thing. And instead of speeding up, we are slowing down. The reason that this happens, the reason that this makes us worse at delivering that value is, well, we think that the process kind of looks like this. This is the implicit framing that it's not just the double diamond, it's the little bit at the end. That the outputs at the end are what's valuable. Everyone talks about outputs, everyone talks about velocity. Velocity is always to production, and it's never to learning. So we try to get to the outputs faster by cutting out research, cutting out low fidelity, skipping straight to hi-fi mockups in Figma, pulling in the design system and really making something really cool that looks beautiful. And all the meantime, our partners tell us lies like, "Oh, we'll definitely validate this with users," or "We're going to build and then we're going to measure and learn." And all that does is convince us to put user-centered activities like user research in some hypothetical future is after we've delivered this quote-unquote value. But the actual process looks something like this. These squares look really simple, and in a way they are. But there's actually a fairly well-developed, delivery framework on the right here that you might have heard of as Agile. It's a system for developing clarity because developers need clarity in the form of requirements in order to write code against it. Unlike designers or researchers or product, you can't just kind of wing it and write code and then see if it works or not, in the sense of delivering value to the customer. But that used to not be the case. Before Agile, in a world ruled by waterfall, developers were faced with what's called the goalie problem. Because the goalie is, whenever a goal is scored, it's the most obvious person responsible. They're at the end of the arena, and so if the puck goes in, well, it's their fault, right? The failures of the rest of the team that let the puck get to the goalie in the first place are invisible. And so even though Agilists talk about, Agile makes us go faster, Agile increases our velocity, the main impact of Agile was not actually getting software out faster. It was insulating developers from the goalie problem because they are now able to adapt to those requirements as they come in. They're not stuck with whatever they get. Unfortunately, most Agile transformations only happen within the engineering team. So there's still an impetus to place the blame on someone, and the goalie problem still exists. It's just moved elsewhere. So if the right side is kind of solved, it's Agile, but developers will just build whatever the idea is given. What about the left side? The left side is kind of the Wild West. It's a world of ambiguity. It's ruled by informal hierarchies between a product manager or a project manager and kind of a stable of stakeholders. And they get together, they form ideas, and half of it is done through, politics and horse trading, and half of it is done through who knows what. And so design is usually somewhere in the middle here. You can see that as a very thin line. By the time the ideas get to us, it's already really too late. We're just asked to, quote unquote, add UX to an idea that's already formed, and it's already approved by those stakeholders. And it's impossible not to add some kind of delay when you work in this way. The design work will always take some time. And frankly, because the idea is already formed, we're not actually adding a lot of value because the idea already has buy-in. It's already assumed the idea is good. And so what we are essentially forced to do when we cut out all of our research, all of our creative work, all of our divergence before we're forced to converge on that idea, is we're just asked to, quote unquote, validate it. And the validating is not a value add. It's not designed to be a value add. It's an exercise to justify our ideas as quickly as possible, because if you recall, only the implementation is the real work. So the faster we get this done, the faster it can begin. And so because the value metric on this left side is the outputs, it's ruled by, a cowboy, the fastest gun in the West, who's shooting ideas from the hip because that's the fastest path to get to outputs. The faster we can clear that left square and get that idea out to developers, the faster they can build it. The quality of the ideas in this paradigm is not important because even if the fastest gun in the West misses, well, they're never going to know because there's no time for learning. You're only shooting deliverables. They will only find out if research steps in and says, oh, we actually built the wrong thing. So in this paradigm, research is not just a time sink. It creates the problems. No matter how brief your research is, no matter how quickly you go to high fidelity visuals, it's not enough. It's adding net negative value because it's pointing out the fact that all of these shots are actually missing. So that's why we're never going to be able to shoot faster than the fastest gun in the West. Not that we haven't tried, to move faster together with our stakeholders, we invented techniques such as user stories, such as personas that summarize research into conversations into reusable artifacts. But unfortunately, the fastest gun in the West has found an exploit, which is that you can skip the conversation and you can just make up the artifacts. This is not the first user story I've seen that looks like this, and it's probably not going to be the last. By combining a very new technology, which is large language models, with a very old technology, which is just making things up, the fastest gun in the West can produce outputs that look just like the outputs of our work. I can go on the internet right now and press a button that creates a synthetic persona. And there was no user research involved, but it creates this thing that looks like the persona was created. It looks like the work was done. And so stakeholders will believe those conversations actually happened, even though they didn't. So the way this works, and the reason this works, is this person intentionally creates a rush around their idea, kicks up a cloud of dust to create ambiguity, and that ambiguity insulates their idea from any critique. Designers are stuck playing defensively because the fastest gun in the West can always make assumptions faster than we can validate them. Always. It's never going to be possible to outrun them. And so the definition of done just becomes deliver this idea. And there's no time to work out the details, because if you spend time working out the details, you can realize the idea is bad. And so by the time we actually find out that the idea is not workable, the responsibility already got passed down to us. We undermine our ability to think critically when we cut out those stages of the process and skip straight to high fidelity. And so that's really the new goalie problem. We are kind of taking on that role ourselves. We take on the responsibility for making the half-baked idea work on our own time, and then we get blamed if we fail. So we get stuck to resorting to things like lorem ipsum to hide the fact that the content work wasn't done. We end up trying to solve information architecture problems and backend problems on the UI layer. And honestly, it never ever works. And an easy way you can tell if you're stuck in this situation is you ask two questions. How will we know if we're wrong? And what will we do if we are wrong? And often the answer is there's nothing we can do, and there's no way we can find out. Because the roadmap is already set in place. There's no room for testing. There's no room for redos, because in this double square world, outputs are king. And outputs are code in production, which means that by the time you get to validating, well, your time box is already over. You have no choice but to find the idea is validated, because it's already shipped. If we find issues, the roadmap is now in disarray, and it essentially is the designer's fault for bringing attention to it. We have to make sure the idea is validated, or we run into a situation where UX is the messenger and kind of suffers for it. So how do we beat that? What do we do if the fastest gun in the West is always going to be faster? Well, instead of trying to outrun it, research can shine a light on the target so that everyone can see that all the shots missed. Rather than play along with the fiction that code in production is all that matters, we have to get fast at illuminating the target, which means not delivering mock-ups, but changing mental models. And high fidelity actually can't help you with that. The faster you rush to get to high fidelity, the faster you skip that point in time when you can change the mental model and you start to emphasize the solution. But you haven't even framed the problem yet. And rushing to the solution is playing right into the hands of these cowboys. Instead, what we need to do is we need to engage stakeholders at the level of desired customer behavior change, at the level of business value. And a high fidelity mockup doesn't have any of this information because the product is not the UI. The UI is just an interface level between the customer and the product. And so all of that information on the UI actually distracts stakeholders from evaluating those fundamental components. This is Jesse James Garrett's diagram of the different levels of an interactive product. It's as true today as it was 20 years ago when it was created. And really it illustrates that the visual fidelity of our artifacts should never outrun the conceptual fidelity, because high fidelity visuals implicitly accept the poorly thought out framing that we've been pinned with. Instead, if you use low fidelity tools, you nail down both the justification for the solution and the design of the solution from the ground up. So starting with user needs and the business objectives of the product itself, rather than skipping all the way forward. And I'm not even talking wireframes. One of my favorite tools to do this is storyboarding, or even press releases or document writing. What that lets you do is quickly frame the problem and the implications of the proposed solution framing. You don't even need to have designed the solution itself. We create these not because we believe it's sufficient, but because it gives enough clarity for our stakeholders to read it and say, hang on a second, this is not meaningful. We would not be proud to build and ship something like this. It will not achieve our business objectives without being distracted by tactical design decisions. And what this does is it lets us gain permission to choose another direction extremely quickly without having to wait for, complex validation, talking to, creating these high fidelity mockups. We can just put this in front of someone, often in the same day, and say, well, that's not very good. That doesn't work. And so this is really the only way to be that faster than someone who's just shooting ideas from the hip. You can never shoot faster than them, but you can always clarify what the target is. And so by the time they've actually fired their shot, what we can do as designers and researchers is help all of our stakeholders see that that shot is nowhere close to the target in reality.
Incredible. Love it. Love the slides, the storytelling, it felt like a therapy session for me, guys. I don't know about you. I guess I wasn't crazy.
I think I went a
all
little
these years.
over.
No, it's okay. Listen, we've got some really interesting comments in the chat, a lot of agreement, a lot of questions. Guys, if you have a question, please, raise your hand or, more conveniently, just unmute yourself and we'll be able to, just moderate a very efficient Q&A for 5 minutes. So, who wants to go first? Might start calling some people out in the chat. I saw some interesting questions. Lindsay, how about I read out your question? Does that sound good? I think that sounds good. So how do you, Pavel, question for you. How do you actually know if you did build the wrong thing rather than what instead of the wrong thing? Yeah, instead of the wrong thing, let me read that again. Rather than what is instead of, how do you know if you built the wrong thing? Sorry. Let's go over that bit of the question.
If I could, I'll refine it. Sorry if I word that
Go for it. Yeah.
Appreciate the call. So basically, there's a crux of what you were saying, Pavel, that I really responded to. An awesome presentation, by the way, just to echo other folks. Really about the wrong thing being built. And I think one of the things that's really challenging as researchers is to show as sort of that end result that, or even in process, we're heading towards that wrong thing, right? How do you define that? There's some work we have to do around success metrics and the like, but I wonder about building a better thing, which I almost feel like could be a stronger argument in a lot of these cases. And so how maybe with your supposition here of the low fidelity prototyping coming to play, how that might help us build a better thing. Maybe that's a good tie-in.
Yeah, so this is the mental model internally that I use in my job of everything should roll up to the kind of the North Star metric and our hypothesis for how we're going to achieve it. And if we've done the work correctly, what we can do is we can say this idea is not only a good way of doing this, it's the best way of doing this. We can compare apples to apples and we can say, well, this is the best solution for delivering this particular primary user benefit, which is the best solution for exploiting this opportunity, which is the best way to increase this input metric, which is the best way to improve the product North Star. If you don't maintain this provenance of why the heck are we doing this in the first place, it is very easy to get to a point where you have a solution, everyone loves it, it seems really cool, but you can't trace your evidence back to anything that matters to anybody. And so if you've done your provenance correctly, you will be able to do this. If you haven't, then it's very easy to point out that, hang on a second, how does this actually roll up to what the business cares about? How are we going to get budget for this from the people who, write the checks?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks for that. One other question here in the chat. So some companies seem to have a launch culture where launching products/features is incentivized rather than launching quality products/features. How can research better shift mental models when incentives conflict?
So there's two things here, I think. One is, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we launching something? And the second is, once you've answered that question, is it the best way to get that outcome? It's really exactly the same thing, exactly the same decision-making process that goes into building good product, goes into figuring out how to build good product. Because there's a lot of value in shipping code, but there's very little value in using code as your only way to learn. Almost when you're learning, you want to understand the ways in which you are wrong and the ways in which it's possible to be wrong and possible to be right. Whereas when you're making software, you are placing a bet that this one way to be right is the best way to be right. So I think that a lot of people, their first instinct is to go to stakeholders and say, hang on, before we've built this, we need to do research. I think that turns people off because they think, okay, well, the only way to really know for sure is to ship. I think the conversation instead needs to be around, what is our hypothesis? What is the fastest way to find out whether or not we are correct or not? And for certain things, that is going to be code. But I think we can challenge our stakeholders and say, instead of building this, which is going to take you, 6 months, I can go talk to 5 people. It's going to take me a week. And I can tell you in broad strokes, not what is the percentage impact going to be, but is it going to be, what's the ballpark? Is it going to be a 3-figure increase, a 2-figure increase, or is it actually going to go down as a result? Because a lot of times, I've had this happen to me. I talk to my stakeholders. They tell me, hey, we have this idea. Go and build it. It's going to be really cool. I talk to people. People say, I will never use this. It doesn't solve my problem. And so that is not something we needed to ship in order to find out. And I think that creating clarity around, is your question a question that needs code, or is your question a question that can be solved just by talking to people, is one of the most important things that research can do.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Pavel. Guys, keep it in the chat. I'm loving the momentum and statements and comments and questions in the chat. But next up, we have Emily Vernon. So yeah, take it away, Emily. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can hear all about your lovely talk.
Awesome. Let's get this going. Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Vernon. I'm going to talk to you about A Sailor's Guide to Creative Risks. Now, the original title for this was A Sailor's Guide to Challenging Norms to Pursue Novel Solutions, but I kind of felt like that was just a bit too long, so we're going to wrap that all up in creative risks. Now, Pavel had a lot of great points in his presentation. I'm going to summarize some of these in one slide in terms of the 5 reasons I see failure in terms of taking larger creative risks within companies. Starting on the left-hand side, and it's almost a square, is not really aligning on the problem to solve, especially the first problem that you need to solve. A lot of that actually comes in because of the second, which is really just kind of looking around and seeing what other people are doing and being like, yes, competitor A is doing that. We need to do that too. Pavel also touched on this, and I think it's actually one of the biggest things in the middle, which is like just not making creative risk-taking worth it to absolutely anyone. The stress, the pain, it's not worth it in a company. And then the other part is really actually just trying to do something new with an everyday processes, whether it's how you get approvals or how you actually go about the process. You won't be able to do new creative things in existing processes. And then my favorite one, which is why we stay at roles for way too long, which is, hope, hoping it will get better at some point. Now, this is why I believe that the future needs navigators. You might be a researcher or a behavioral scientist or designer, but in the end, you help people navigate through new creative risks. And that's why today we're going to go through the 5 R's of creative risks to make you even better navigators after this presentation. Now, personally, I've really sailed a lot of nautical miles in my life and seen how people react to things that can feel threatening. I've worked with a lot of top brands across all sorts of industries, and I feared for my life 453 times. And that's because I am a brand experience director. I am kind of upstream when it comes to some of those decisions. And well, the fearing for my life part probably comes from the fact that I am a full-time sailor. And those images were definitely taken in different seasons. And here's the thing in terms of creative risks is so many times we say we're going from point A to point B. And I have no idea, all you people in the audience, what this point B is, because we're going to be working in the same teams, in the same hybrid office, on the same computer. There is no point B. You have to get people from point A back to point A with a fresh perspective. This is why we do leadership workshops and come back to our teams, or we go travel far places and come back to our home, or why we're attempting a circumnavigation for 3 years of uncertainty and pain to only get back to the same place. And this is why I believe the 5 R's of creative risks are R's and not B. It's not about being bold and brave and breakthrough. I don't want to be bold and brave if I don't need to. But when it comes to these R's, it helps people to get ready to do something. And that can help in terms of in the start of the process and throughout. The 5 R's of creative risks are refuge, readiness, rally, resonance, and radar. You can say that 5 times fast to yourself on mute. When it comes to refuge and readiness, it's really being able to have fallback options and being ready for the different steps along the way. Rally is really uniting the team throughout the whole process because it takes a while and you need a lot of patience when it comes to doing new things within a company. Resonance is a word we just don't talk about enough. It could be the word for 2025, but it's really tuning into sentiment, whether it's business, stakeholder, or your team. And then radar is just constantly scanning your surroundings to see what that is. Now, put on those life jackets because we're going to go through these 5 R's of creative risks in 5 frameworks and mental models to show you this in action. So when we go sailing, we use the Beaufort scale to understand our conditions in terms of wind and wave conditions. And I just wonder, why don't we know this in terms of business conditions? They're pretty typical. This is why I've created the business Beaufort scale. Just to give you an idea of the Beaufort scale, it kind of looks like this. 0 to 10 can go a little higher. It tells you the type and conditions. When it comes to the business Beaufort scale, it starts to show you what are the typical conditions in terms of severity, if you will, that you might have when you deal with different projects. And a lot of these are quite predictable. Let's just zoom in to 3, which is a moderate disruption. You're dealing with new entrants in the market, changing the customer expectations, or maybe a customer service issue. Much like back to what Pavel said, what problems are you solving? And some of them are because of business conditions. And if we can talk about it in a way that is structured, it makes it easier. Now, as we're doing a circumnavigation, we're not going to do 2-week nonstop tracks in the beginning. We're going to do little things and build up our progress. And that's the same thing with doing new creative things, is really constantly improving your team. And that's why we can do a readiness cycle. In terms of a readiness cycle, there are 5 stages, all the way from skill discovery in the bottom right-hand side back to performance boost in the middle bottom. And all of these you need to do in order to progress and align. So you're not doing something all the way in collaboration when you haven't aligned on the skills necessary or the knowledge necessary to do something new and to challenge norms. When it comes to skill discovery, it can be big training. It can actually just be workshops and small meetings. And all of this helps in terms of alignment as well as solution building, because each of these ideas builds upon itself. Because when it comes to being relevant and ready, you're going to be doing new problems constantly because markets and our audiences are changing. Now, in sailing, we do drills, or we should probably do more drills. We've gotten a little lazy, but we do a lot of drills in terms of things that could go wrong. For example, someone going overboard or not having the way to use your engine. And we do drills for this, or we talk through it. And that made me think, why don't we do this as teams? We do these inspirational workshops, but we never try to look at how do we deal with these setbacks? Because again, they're pretty expected. And that's why I think we can do risk-taking team drills to prepare for these. This graphic is really looking at what are those typical drills you can do. This can be a workshop. It could be just one of these within your team meeting or discussing it, role play, but it starts to address the common issues that you're going to have when you do something new. Let's go to my favorite one because it's the end of the year, which is budget constraints. Okay, maybe you might have to spend more budget right now, but let's say that your budget has been suddenly cut. What should you do? If you talk through these beforehand, they're just way easier because I hate to say it, these aren't obstacles in the road. This is just the road, and it's better to work through it ahead of time as a team. Now, this actually comes to an interesting point that all of you have seen, which is best practices. And I can tell you some are best practices and some are just outdated concepts. And within sailing, we've had it for 6,000 years, but we still discuss what is the best fit for us. You have to really understand what works for you and your project. And that's why I've created a best fit decision tree. This can help you to go from what is that best practice someone has just mentioned, and really is it the best fit for you for your project? And along the way, you have questions to get to green, best fit, or what do you have to do and reconsider? Let's not read all these questions, but for example, does it contribute to your brand goals, resonate with your audience needs and behaviors? No, well, you probably have to research or develop a new approach. And if yes, you can keep going. Now, I can tell you, I've seen a lot of processes that aren't perfect, but at least you can start to pinpoint where something is and have a structured discussion when it comes to, is this best practice outdated, not good for us, or actually could be a best fit in terms of whatever problem we're trying to solve. Now, I don't know if you know, unless you are huge World War II buffs and watch these types of documentaries, but there's a lot of skepticism when it came to radar, but it became game-changing in World War II, and we use it a lot so we can see things. And I would say that emotions we kind of are talking about, but they can be even better progress indicators for our projects. And this is why I've created the empathy radar off of something that we use when we go out sailing. In terms of any emotion on the outside, they can develop in positive and negative paths. And if you can know where that emotion is, you can either change it or you can keep it on track, because any one person's emotion is going to come before kind of a project catastrophe. For example, when it comes to enthusiasm and curiosity, it can become impatience or it can become focus. And if you know where it is, you can start to shift it over and have that conversation of why are we going toward a burnout, or why are we going toward hopefully being productive. And it's the same thing in terms of frustration. You can go to dialogue or you can go anger and resentment. And if you don't catch it at the end, it will either be you have a stronger team, which is good, or you might have a team breakdown. But that radar helps you see where are you going to change course, change direction. Now, with any creative risks, you have upsides and downsides. Downsides being getting caught in fishing nets, and those are really nasty. Upsides, you have dolphins coming with, playing with you when you're sailing. And that's the same thing with creative risks. You're going to find things that are fishing nets, and you're going to find things that are really delightful and make you smile a bit. And I can now say that you are all certified in terms of navigating creative risks. This is for Faisal. So thank you, Faisal, for organizing this. And these are all ideas I try to explore on my newsletter, Brand Void, because I've just seen how people take real risks and creative risks to be a lot of similarities. And if you want to reach out to me, whether it's just to say hi or an emoji, or if you want the deck or want to join the newsletter, you can find me in one of two places at the moment. On the left-hand side, I'm in Santa Marta, Colombia, on Sailing Vessel Fortuna. Coming down if you're around, or you can find me in this QR code on LinkedIn. It's probably the more accessible way to find me. And I hope you all can navigate in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Emily. That was incredible. So many things to unpack. Are you currently on your boat?
Yes, you're actually seeing my real background, not my
This is
fake background
incredible.
being on the boat.
Wow. For those of you who aren't aware, Emily is a bit of a sailor nomad who goes around the world sailing and working from her boat, which blew my mind the first time I spoke with you. Never seen that lifestyle before. So yeah, keep it going. Yeah, I mean, in terms of your talk, two things for me that I'll definitely be taking away. I mean, really love the decision tree aligning with what you want to do in your brand. And the second thing for me was the team drills, just going through those what ifs and role playing before that obvious scenario that you will have to encounter at some point in the future, and having an answer, but also an alignment with your team. So guys, with that said, I mean, we've got just over 4.5 minutes to 5 minutes to go with some Q&As. I haven't had a look at the chat, but please do unmute yourselves if you have any questions that you would like to go over with Emily.
I am not scary, so you can ask any question that comes to your mind.
I'm putting Hillary on the spot, but she's got a great
Ooh,
question.
Yeah.
Hillary.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. Hillary, how do we get some of these examples, or e.g., how do we get some of these empathy radar readiness cycles and the team drills?
I
Is that a
just,
question around how getting the resources or the document?
yeah, can I clarify that? So I just meant
Go for
the
it.
slides. I think a lot of the slides you shared, Emily, are really great. Just for long-term research in general. So I wondered how we could get access to them.
Oh,
If
yeah, sure. I can. Hillary, great question. I'm happy to send through a link to the presentation, and you can grab those from there.
Thank you.
Yes, Lindsay,
Yeah, thanks.
it is a great internet connection, isn't it? Do you want to give us a bit of an insight into how you've got your setup going around the world on your boat?
Oh, Starlink has changed everything for us, and nothing crazy, I guess. Like you kind of get used to it in terms of working and sailing and being able to explore different things. So being able to be connected has really changed actually the entire sailing community.
No,
We
it's
use it out
incredible,
in the middle of the
honestly.
ocean.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, so for those of you who want to go, I guess to the PCT or sail around the world, just get yourself a Starlink and you're good to go, and a remote role and you're good to go. So yeah, thank you so much, Emily. So let's move over now to our third speaker, Sophie, who is a UX researcher at Centrica. So yeah, take it away, Sophie.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, is it all good? Just yeah, cool. Yeah, sorry, it's all in the way. Okay, so yeah, today we're gonna have a quick exploration of the psychology behind survey. So staying on that theme of the boat, the exploration, and yeah, that's probably one of my favorite meme to represent stakeholders when they have an idea. Like Pavel said, they just fire ideas and like, okay, what should we do to validate that wonderful idea that I just had when I dreamt or when my friend asked me? Let's just do survey. And I think there's a lot of reason why survey are just like a really badly used research method in UX, but not only, like I think in wider teams for commercial marketing, we see bad surveys a bit everywhere. And the other day I was just on Instagram and they asked me if I wanted to, how likely I would be to shop from a brand called FNF. And the thing is like, I have never shopped from that brand. So if I answer that survey and someone I hope won't rely on people just scrolling on Instagram and not knowing their brand. So yeah, just like there's so multiple examples of bad surveys, and I think the famous "Do you like that? Yes, no. Will you use that? Yes, no" is the worst example. So today I'm just going to show you how we can kind of craft better questions, and also how we can educate our stakeholders and push back when they're like, oh, can we do a survey or things like that. But first of all, what is a survey? Actually, when we talk about survey, we often talk about questionnaire. And I really like that definition that Caroline Jarrett gives in her book, Survey That Work, a really good book as well, if you want to start into survey or just kind of have a really good refresher. So it's a process of asking questions that are answered by a sample of a defined group of people to get numbers that you can use to make decisions. In a nutshell, it's a quantitative research method that enables you to make better informed decisions by getting numbers. So yeah, once that's clear for everyone, then we can move on by the first foundation of doing good surveys is to ask the right questions. So first of all, is survey the right method? And I think there's like kind of 4 key questions. What is a survey? And I think most of the time it's assumed to be a really easy, quick, inexpensive method that you can do at scale, and it really gives that impression that you will get a big answer, but actually, and also a good answer. But the thing is that you can get a big answer from the wrong type of people. So then you have to understand, why are you doing survey? Why do you need it? What are your objectives? What do you want to know or validate or invalidate as well? And then when, so obviously depending on where you're at your product design lifecycle, talking about UX, then survey is quite a good method at every stage. So I think that's why it's very versatile. And so people just think they can use it whenever. And lastly, who? So who are you going to survey? New customers or current customers? Really depends on your objectives. But, let's hypothesize and say that you've got everything nailed down. It's the right method. Your stakeholders know, what they want to learn, etc. Then we move on to the how, which is like where I want to kind of dive in tonight. Tonight, I mean, this evening, at least in the UK. And the thing is to ask the question right, which is the next step to design good surveys. And I think like just knowing why survey touched the psychology of this, there's like hundreds of like thousands of papers. But basically that's kind of like the process that happens in someone's mind when they answer questions. Here they are presented as kind of like a process where you need to understand a question, after see the different options that you have, then decide on which option, suit best your situation or your experience, and then respond. However, they all happen at the same time, and sometimes they even happen before you ask your question. So somebody might have already decided about what they might want to answer even before receiving your survey. So I think that's very complex what's happening into someone's brain when answering a question, not just for survey, it's just basically for any kind of research. But then, if we touch on the most popular, which is like closed-ended questions in surveys, obviously you've got ranking questions, and I'm going to take the same example here throughout the presentation, which is the worst British dish? I haven't taken French because French cuisine doesn't have any bad dishes. Sorry, I had to do this. But yeah, so in those 4 options, you've got lamb's liver, haggis, jellied heels, black pudding. I'll show you a quick picture after, but you don't really want to see it. But if I ask people to rank those, and myself, for example, I've only tried 1 out of those 4 dishes. So how am I supposed to rank those items, knowing that I basically don't have experience with 3 of those? And that's the case for any ranking questions for new features. How many times we've seen, 10 new features, and it's like, okay, ask users to rank them. That's not great. However, by, understanding biases and your own bias, but also the bias that your respondents might have, you can, change it and just select the 2 British dishes you think are the worst. You can choose up to 2 answers. You can also add an option other. You also have non-applicable. And here you give more freedom to your respondents, and you are more likely to gain accurate insights than by just having the ranking question that is also quite hard to analyze. So just one example of how kind of understanding a bit and having empathy for people who answer make that, you're not asking leading questions and you gain better insights. That's a picture of like the food. So I'm just not gonna leave it for long because that's quite disgusting. But then talking about rating scales, also very widely used technique. And here, how appetizing do you think jellied heels are? And what's interesting there is that, in general, rating scales are presented horizontally in most softwares, at least. But when I started in my new company, we had a really good survey tool, but they didn't have the rating scale kind of format that I wanted. It was just NPS, so it was just 10 points, and I wanted an odd number. So I thought, how can I do a rating scale? And I just thought by having a single choice question and just having like my rating points there. And in general, you would have extremely appetizing at the top, so the positive at the top. And you see where I'm coming. You have the primacy effect also when things are listed vertically, where people tend to select a bit more what's at the top. So that's one bias, but there's also other bias that happen. So you can tweak your question by also just not assuming that people think that jelly heat are appetizing, but you just ask how unappetizing or appetizing that is, and just invert your adjective, have the negative at the top, and there you already kind of mitigate bias and ensure your insights are also more reliable. So those are just small tweaks that you can make when you see a bad survey, and that just kind of, make it a little bit more reliable in the sense of, psychology that happens when people answer it. So here are a few do and don'ts that there's obviously like a lot, the one that I kind of like. So, avoiding ringing question, also testing your questions with your audience, it's very important. Providing options if you can, more flexibility, other, non-applicable, and also in the negative, don't use binary answers. In general, there's always more than two answers, and two answers that are not just yes or no. Just do a test with a lot of things and you will see that's quite accurate. And also don't ask for predict future behavior. I think that's a really big misconception that happens in surveys. And maybe in some cases, but I would say most of the time that doesn't work. Like, how likely people would do something that they don't even know what it is. I think that's quite hard. And we do the same in user interviews as well. You base on previous experience. So yeah, coming to open-ended questions, which tends to be open text box, why, blah, 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 or, that's kind of the most general one. What I want to talk about today is sentence completion technique, which was explored by this lovely man, Dr. Herman Enbigas. He was the first one to explore it in the field of psychology in 1897. So that's why this picture is quite old. And he studied that for intelligent tests in clinical education about implicit memory or education. So, sentence completion is quite simple. It's you give people the start of a sentence and they have to finish it. However, in the field of UX or human-computer interaction, that hasn't been researched a lot. The kind of like formal study I found was 2012, most recent 2024 actually. So there's been a more recent study about it. And the goal is to kind of explore UX or also understand user needs and values. And that's done by, kind of enabling your users to express richer, more spontaneous, most honest feedback by giving them flexibility. So how is that done? It's hypothetically, so that was designed by researchers, and I'm just kind of relaying one way. It's probably will evolve over time, but after using a service or a product, people are given beginning of sentences. In the research, it was between 12 and 24, but that's up for debate and testing and everything else that goes with that. And they need to do that to they've got like a questionnaire. It's more like they have to think about like more like the experience they had with the service. So it's a mix of a questionnaire and also a projective technique about using a product and a service. So it's a great lightweight method for researchers to gain remote feedback, qualitative feedback at scale in a more cost-effective way that might be for user interviews, for example, or way more time consuming. But what is important in that is the response stimulation. Obviously, if you give them 15 sentences, you need to make sure that the beginning of sentences are stimulating enough to provide good feedback. And that's where all the research still has to happen in terms of what's the best practices. Here are a few examples of sentence based on one of the research. So, in terms of usability, this product would be easier to use if, or the ideal vision, the ideal product would be. I'm not an expert at all in that technique. It's just something that I've been kind of experimenting. And some of the research say that using I, make users feel more like that, they own the insight and are more likely to express their feedback. But most recent research says that, whether they use I or, another thing doesn't really influence it significantly. So, that's still kind of up for debate there. But if we've seen with that example of the worst British dish, what if, for example, I just ask people, I think the worst British dish is, and there you go, you've got a way simpler, obviously a bit longer to analyze, but now we've got the tools to do that. And actually I asked that question to find the 4 dishes that British people found the worst. So, full circle there. And yeah, pro tip, this is also used on dating apps. That's Bumble, sentence completion. So you see, if you need to convince people to explore, it's already done, hopefully to meet your future partner. And yeah, just remember it's very easy to write a bad survey that gathers flow data to support a lot of ideas that are basically not grounded on anything except your stakeholders, like gut feeling. So yeah, that's it for my talk. Don't hesitate to connect us with on LinkedIn if you want to talk about that more.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sophie. Virtual clap. As someone who is currently in the process of building out survey programs, a lot of notes I'll be taking on the playback of this session. So let's jump right into the Q&A session. We've got a really interesting question here from Shreya. So I'll read it out. So hello, this is amazing, Sophie. Congratulations. I'm sure you'll find that it's easier for people to express negative opinions more than positive ones. How do we get people to express more / share more of what works well? Should we just keep the two separate?
I think in general, stakeholders, especially with survey, they want to hear very positive feedback. So they will kind of ask their question to geared towards their, ideas. And that's why kind of like yes, no works well. In that case, you end up with like 80% of people would love to use that product. And that's where, it's easy to express positive feedback. So I think that it's okay to collect positive feedback. And I think it's good to hear. But when you do research as well, that's when there's assumptions. And I always believe that it's better to kind of focus more on the negative, not saying it just needs to be negative, but if your experience is positive, that's great. It's great to know. It's great that, your survey kind of highlights what works well and what you should keep continue doing. But I think in a survey, nothing should be geared towards, expressing negative or positive. I think you should just be as neutral as possible when you ask your question and you design them. And that's why, in that rating scale, it's like how unappetizing or appetizing, because I'm not making the assumption that that thing is good or not. And you can do the same for a lot of other cases. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Sophie, and your incredible deep dive into surveys. So let's now move over to our last but not least speaker, Amanda. Amanda, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I'm excited to share with you all. So basically, I'm just gonna get going. So I'm gonna be speaking on linked influencing. So this is something, near and dear that I love because it's fun. We've now learned some really incredible strategies across the 3 researchers that have shared really insightful nuggets. And I'm going to show us how we're going to bring that forward and really bring a powerhouse to our social network, our ability to connect with others, and also just make it hit, So we're going to be talking about linked influencing. So a little bit of bits and bolts, very on brand for our lightning chats. We're going to be going through 4 different tenets. So network and chill, beat the algorithm, play and experiment, and of course, the lightning factor. You'll want to stick around for this one because it's very on brand, as you may discern. So what's our first category? Network and chill. So ultimately, knowing when to strike. So when we think about our professional brand and who we are and how we go about this, it's important to, leverage LinkedIn in these ways. And this is something I have tested, I've tried, and it absolutely is really hit. So that's been fun. But ultimately, these are 4 things that I think are really great to kind of kick off your linked influencing is follow your inspo, seek out those people that are inspirational to you, see what they're doing to gain traction, engagement, and impact across their medium, and kind of start to model and carve out your own niche in that way. Also cold DM, we're all humans here. We all started somewhere. So if you find something that's really intriguing or something that's like very passion forward or that you're just really drawn to, like message them and tell them that was an awesome podcast episode. I loved what you talked about. Are you down for virtual coffee? I can't tell you how many times this really, makes sense. It works and people really admire that. And everyone loves flattery. So that's always a fun thing. And then another way to do this in terms of like building that network, getting that visibility is indeed engagement. So commenting, reacting, reposting, and, posting with your own perspective and opinions. People like to know the story. We're all researchers or strategists in some capacity, and being able to effectively convey a message and really build and piece into that narrative is how you sell an idea. It's how you sell yourself and what you bring to the table. And, engage. I've met many individuals through webinar like network docs, so things that are shared out, like when you're joining a conference or what have you, and many near and dear friends. So, attend webinars, get engaged, pop off in the chat, like have fun and just, be genuine, because that's really what matters. So the next segment of this is beat the algorithm. This is something that is fickle and fancy, and we see it happening in Instagram, whether it's our ability to access our, followership or share out our media. How do we get ourselves seen? And we can kind of look into how to do that. So these are 4 things that I've leveraged that have really helped me kind of, go ahead with this is hashtags and tags. They're not dead, believe me, they definitely work. We've gained lots of opportunities through this, and you'll get into what I mean when I say we. So in a little bit, but ultimately using hashtags, going off of whatever you're talking about. Let's say you're doing a presentation, or you're speaking at a podcast, or you're leading a team cross-functional thing. Use every hashtag you could think of to like loop people in, and tag some of the things you're talking about. What are accounts that are inspiring you and doing this and that? And then consider the time of day, not just where you are, the best time to post, but also who's engaging with you. Where do they live? You can see a lot of this through post impressions on LinkedIn. If you like have premium, or who's following you and how they're engaging, and make sure you interact with your followers, repost, comment, shout people out. When you comment, you get more visibility, and then that can kind of just loop in. You see who others are following, and then that just becomes a beautiful kind of cycle. And ultimately, all this leads to knowing your audience. The more you engage, the more you start to understand. You could do polls like a survey on your LinkedIn, or you could interact through comments, or throw little, carved out ideation around how you would content create. So I talked about we for a second, but how do I know that this actually works? Well, it does, because my dog is semi-Insta famous. So basically, how this began was that I was really interested in my puppy. I was obsessed, and I wanted to kind of connect with others out there in the world. And so I started testing this stuff. These algorithm beating like opportunities, like ways in which I could leverage a network, build a brand. And again, look at that motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing as a researcher? Why are you here? Why are you using LinkedIn? And in order to do that, you can then push out from that motivation and really sing. So through hashtags, we got an opportunity to be featured in the Daily Mail. We've also had licensing partnerships with Meta and all kinds of other things. And we're at like 8,000, almost 9,000 followers on Instagram. So just, again, fun and games, a little bit about me. I tease that I'm the Kris Jenner of the dog world. Very much like showing this evolution of Insta fame. And really it came down to some of those tenets. I was obsessed with my dog. I found there was an incredible community online, incredible community of researchers, strategists, just like on LinkedIn. And then I built rapport and was very authentic with how I grew that followership. So we were testing out new ways of engagement all the time through stories, through comments, and then that moved into or morphed into brand partnerships, endorsements, licensing deals, getting sent a bunch of free stuff. And ultimately that led to Bush's following growing to over 8,000 followers. And here's some content here. We got a plug, as Kris Jenner mama would. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. And that was my dog. So what did I do? I turned right around and leveraged the same thing for myself on LinkedIn. So I became a top UXR research voice. And I used those similar techniques. So I observed what others did. I sought out who I was, really inclined to or inspired by, who was sort of like really delivering their authentic self. And I really magnified that in my own way that I showed myself. online. And so I determined my own tone, voice, and humor and how that related to my professional brand via posts and what have you. Carved out my own niche. And like I said, by gaining exposure through being a top voice, I got, opportunities like People of Research to come and chat with you all, or being on podcasts or what have you. But also, you have to be you. And I will, beat this drum and up on the hillside. But when you test things out and you're authentic and true to you, like that's really what's going to sing. People love that. And this should be fun. This is you. It's the best thing. So these are just screenshots of me testing out different times a day, different moments of engagement, different types of content. I even included some funny meme girl memes that were all about UXR humor, but I created all these. So it's just like having fun, thinking about pop culture, what I cared about, and how to make that relevant or shape that into what I was trying to put forward or out into the world. And it was working, got some pretty good engagement across the board. So ultimately, getting a little hint on that, to play and experiment. This is something that we should all be doing as we, leverage our media. So how might we determine our tone and voice? Are we humorous? Are we using a scholarly positionality? Are we inspirational? And really like dovetailing that into how you present yourself online. And create content. So like observe what you like, what you're drawn to, and find out like what's true to you and how you want to leverage and be seen across that professional platform. And again, like I can't stress enough, when you genuinely engage, people see that, people love that. And also that really resonates. And then you build, again, more rapport and more trust in your followers. And again, always just carve out your niche. You do you. Ultimately, like figuring out who you are and what your unique factor is will really make an impact overall. Okay. So I built all that up. Now we're in the lightning factor. We're very exciting. So really, this is something about the strategies in which we take all of what we did and we really start to lean into like, how do we do this now? So what's some actionable steps? So the first part of this for me would be, the who. So if I'm thinking about the way I want to present myself professionally, like on the internet stage, I want to really be introspective and I want to look at those goals. What are my strengths? What are my unique skills that I bring to the table? How can I leverage those in my industry, in research, in strategy? What makes you you? And then now start to think about, where do I want this to take me, or where am I at currently? Am I loving my job? Am I just getting out of school? Am I kind of bored with where I'm at? Am I wanting to do a bit of discipline hopping? Because this is also going to help you, carve out your niche and find that way in which you can present out yourself effectively across your portfolio, across your LinkedIn, what have you. And then ideally, where do you want to be? Now, I love a blue sky, and I'll never say that we can't achieve what we can from a blue sky perspective, because I certainly have in multiple times where I thought things were impossible. So think about that dream role in your career and just pivot yourself and really like throw yourself into how do I get there? So how do I shape and again, leverage those unique bits of myself and those skills, do some reverse planning. If I want to be in this positionality and I want to get all of these followers, been speaking in a TED Talk, and you make all this influence like across like big Fortune 500 companies, what's the reverse planning I need to do to get there? And you can use LinkedIn to do this. This is a tool and you can absolutely leverage it. So think about that as you kind of position yourself online. Ultimately, just want to say thanks to everyone who was able to attend. I know we're a little over time, so appreciate you hanging out with me. And feel free to catch me up on either LinkedIn, as you can see, like mother, like son, or you could follow my dog's Instagram if I'm boring. So thank you so much. And any questions, feel free to pop off me and I will answer them.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Amanda. As someone who spends a lot of time on LinkedIn, a bit too much time, yeah, definitely a lot of notes I've taken. But also, yeah, one of the things I like about building your personal brand, as mostly researchers, there's a lot of like testing and learning that you have to kind of implement. in terms of your, your content, if you're producing content, but also if you're cold reaching out to people.
Right.
There are so many different ways in which you can do that, right? In terms of LinkedIn messages, emails, Twitter,
Yeah.
threads or whatever. But yeah, point being, there's so much, mini user research you can do, so much content work, and yeah, it's
Mhm.
immensely valuable for your professional and personal life. Yeah. So, guys, with that said, I mean, I know that we're a little bit over, but I'd love to kind of just see if we've got any questions from the audience. I know that we're about 8 minutes over the meeting limit. We've got about how many of you left here? About just over 40 something in the room. Yeah, if you have a question about building your personal brand or are curious about how to get Insta famous, please ask away. Okay.
Promise
I
I
mean,
don't
one
laugh.
question I had, one of the things I'm, thinking about, and this is, yeah, as someone who has gone cross-platform, as I say, from LinkedIn to Instagram and vice versa, what would you say are the key consideration one needs to make as you are building out a personal brand, but also working across multiple touch points? So that could be, Twitter, that could be
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and various other social media, personally, but also, professionally speaking.
Right. I think the biggest thing that I always recommend doing is really info arcing it out. So, like, consider the information architecture in which you are approaching it. If you have all these media, awesome. Go back to that strategic framework. Who am I? What do I want to put out here? How am I going to leverage this in a unique and inviting way? And then from there, just kind of like move through that strategic framework of like, where am I at right now? How do I'm going to get there? And then, sort of do the reverse planning. And then I think from there, like dissecting through the information architecture. Okay, Twitter only has this many character count. Instagram allows me to do this, but Reels actually hit better if I'm more of a photographer or something like that. Figuring out like a little case study on each platform and then ways in which you can leverage and kind of infuse that. Again, always just being you and being true to your North Star.
Yeah, incredible. One question here from Michelle. What advice do you have for those who are cold reaching out on LinkedIn but don't seem to be getting responses?
Just nag them. No, I'm just kidding. I think flattery. So I'll tell you what I do. And I have hit up some big players in the past, like just people I thought I really admired or was really impressed by, or at companies I had maybe no business even messaging because I was like, man, this is iconic. Like I have to, whatever. So I just start with flattery. I mean, I think that's one of the best things you can do. Just say, oh my God, like I love this. This was so incredible. And da da da. I'd love to like have a coffee and talk about how you sort of like journeyed through that. People love to talk about themselves, as we know from a research perspective. So when you give them that platform and you show that you genuinely care and you're very invested, it's going to open up a door. So I would try that. A little flattery, little ho hum, and that might
Yeah.
help.
100%, I agree with you. I mean, as someone who I'd love to add to this question, as someone who spends a lot of time doing cold outreach to, find speakers, many of
Yeah,
you here were cold outreach too.
there it
Yeah,
is.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things I'd recommend people do is always think about the incentive, right? But also the motivation. So why are you reaching out? Are you going and reaching out to people so that you can give them something, or are they giving you something? Right. And I
Right,
think being very honest and intentional about that. So if you're reaching out to someone who's quite senior in the industry and you want to talk about their journey and their career, realistically speaking, there's not much they're getting from you, but you're, getting a lot from them. So shaping your message in a way that's genuine and really intentional about that exchange can hopefully just kind of increase the likelihood of response. The other thing you should I think consider doing is get them on a medium where they're active. I think,
right.
LinkedIn is great in terms of accessibility, but there are a lot of people that I reach out to on Twitter, for instance, even though it's a platform, that's kind of somewhat dying. But people are still active on that platform. Getting where people are great. And if the person in question is, giving talks, in person, I think works a lot better than virtual. Obviously, we're in a distributed world. But yeah, if you have that chance, that's what I would recommend. Just being very intentional about the exchange. Try to go in person, and also just iterate, test and learn the type of message you send to people. If you're doing this often, you want to also just be, a little bit more concise, using people's names. You'll be surprised by how many people I get a lot of these cold DMs, and people won't really read your profile or have an idea of even spelling someone's name incorrect. These are all things that happen. Yeah, just taking the time to be intentional and curated is something that I will definitely recommend. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I know we're a little bit over. I mean, please do share us on LinkedIn. I know that we do a lot of promotions everywhere across LinkedIn. But yeah, if you've got a minute in the next week or two, drop our link in your company Slack channel. We're a free community, and it does help with running things and just getting more reach. If you're interested in taking part in a future lightning talks, we're always really open to having people reach out. And yeah, it's a very accessible community, so there's no real barrier as long as you have good content. We're very happy to have you as part of our People of Research Lightning Talk series. So my email is in the chat. It's hello@peopleofresearch.com. And if you can't find that, just go to LinkedIn and type in People of Research, and you'll find our page, and you'll find the people section. You can find me, you can message the page, whatever. And yeah, guys, I mean, that's it. I mean, what's next? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for joining. And yeah, that's it from us, guys. It's about 15 minutes over. We hope that you've enjoyed it. This will be recorded, and it will be shared out in the newsletter and on LinkedIn in about 2.5 weeks after Sophie's conference talk. So yeah, ciao, guys. Have a good evening, good morning, or good night, wherever you are.